So another overview of some of the new modules that were added recently to the VCV library. As always, these modules are available for free, so please consider supporting the developers. The first module is another great addition from Venom. It's a wave folder that of course can shape incoming signals in various ways. So here I have a sequence with slips and the VCO unit also from Venom. Right, this is already going through the wave folder, and the interesting thing here is, for example, the preamp, right, will go all the way down to 0, so we can use this also as a combination of a VCA and folder. I have here an envelope, a modulated envelope that I can use to bring this voice in. Right, so again, we can use this as a combination of a VCA and a wave folder. And we'll add some delay to this. We can also, of course, shape modulation sources. Here I have two VCO units going through a chorus and a filter, and I have here an LFO, a triangle LFO, modulating the filter, right, as you can see here on the scope. Right, again, the LFO is going also through the wave folder, so we can also fold now the LFO. We can also, for example, modulate the bias here with another LFO, again, just to add movement and to create a different shape. You can also now fold it with the preamp or with the stage amp. And to make things a bit more rhythmic, a bit more in sync, let's say, I can also reset the LFOs. Here I have a clock division of 4. Of course, this is the Bay module from Venom, which will just teleport the clock signals across the patch. So I have here a clock division of 4 that I will use to reset the LFOs. Right, and now we have something a bit more rhythmic, a bit more repetitive. The wave folder will also work great with audio rate modulation. So here I have another sequence, in this case with the ORBSEC, sequencing another VCO unit. Right, this is already going through a wave folder or the wave folder, and I have here the VCO unit or another VCO unit that I will use to modulate the preamp at audio rates. If you right click the CV input here, we have an option for bipolar VCA, which is what you need when you use something like a VCO, that is bipolar modulation. So here now I will add this again at audio rates. Right, so another way to shape the sound. I have here another VCO unit. This will modulate the stage amp at audio rates. Right, so you can create all sorts of sounds. This is going through a filter, through tangents. And I have here an envelope that I can use to make this a bit more percussive. The next module is Crust from Bastel, which is also available in hardware, of course. It's a percussive voice, can be also melodic. Right, we have all sorts of controls here, like for example, just an oscillator or just noise or combination of both. We have also clipping and filtering and an envelope. Different types of noise, we can add some pitch sweeping, so you can create all sorts of different sounds here. In this case, I have it triggered by the clock. Right, and I always like using polymetric modulation or sequencing, so I have here an 8-step sequence. This one I will use to modulate the envelope. And then I have a 7-step sequence that I will use to modulate the layer, so noise or oscillator. And then I have here a 5-step sequence that I will use to modulate the timbre, in this case clipping. Right, so there are all sorts of different sounds you can create with it. I have here another layer with a delay. right? Again, just to add a bit more complexity to this. And again, as I mentioned, this can also be a melodic voice, doesn't have to be just percussive. Here I'm using slips to sequence it, and I have some random modulation here to the layer and envelope. Now we can also control it via the velocity input, so we don't have to use the triggers, we can also use the velocity and create something a bit more with more movement, amplitude-wise. So I have here the Benjamin oscillator, in this case it's sequencing the velocity. Right, and I'm also sequencing the pitch, the filter here. Right, so another noisy layer. And I have here also a bass drone with some movement on the pitch. So what I'm doing here, I'm triggering Crust at audio rates with the VCV VCO. This is going through a chorus and a filter, and I have an LFO modulating the frequency. There are two new modules from Befaco. We have Bandit, which is a filter bank with interesting features, and we have the Molten bypass, which can be interesting to use with effects. So here I have a sequence with Max Slicer. This is sequencing the Pony VCO, right? And this is already going through Bandit. So we have 4 different bands. If I bring in the lowest band, this is a low pass filter basically. Right now we listen just to the lowest band, and we can now process the other bands. So for example, I have here a chorus, so I can send, we have here individual outputs, I can send the second band to the chorus. Right, and now just this band goes to the chorus. This can also work as send and return. I have here a delay, so I can send the third band to the delay and then the delay back into the return here on the module. Right, and now only the third band goes to the delay. I have here also a really nice reverb here that I will use with the 4th layer. Just to add more complexity. Right, so we can process each band individually. We can also use this to mix signals. Here I have 3 even VCOs. You can see they are differently tuned. One is going to the all-in, so it will be routed to all the bands, but I'm breaking this routing with 2 more inputs here, the 3rd and the 4th. Right, so they go to their own bands, and we have control over the amplitude. So as you can see, I have here LFOs modulating the amplitudes of the bands. The last band, by the way, I'm taking out to its own channel with panning modulation. Right, so also this you can do. You can also process this externally if you want. And now with the Molten bypass module, we can bring effects in and out. Here I have a sequence with slips, again sequencing the Pony VCO, and I have the Molten bypass here set with the surge delay. Right, for now it's off. Let me just solo this for a second. Right, for now there is no delay, but now I can mix it in and then bypass it again. It's really nice also because there is a fade in and out, so there are no clicks or anything. Right, and of course we can do this with the trigger. In this case I'm going to use the trigger from the slip output of the sequencer, so this will bring the effect in and out. Right, so quite an interesting module. The next module is That's No Moon from Dan T. This is a generative sequencer that will give you a different sequence each day. We can control the length of the sequence. This will go up to 64 steps. And we have multiple outputs. We have the value output and the mode output. You can use this for pitch and modulation, for example. And we have also two rhythmic outputs with two different trigger sequences. And of course, this is also quite useful, the sort of end of cycle output, if you will. By the way, if you like the sequence, you can also lock it, which will make sure that you will always get the same results. Right in the right-click menu, you can lock the current seed, and then every time you open the patch, you get the same sequence if you like that sequence of that specific day. Right, so of course I have a few examples here. Here I have a 16-step sequence. I'm using the value to sequence one VCO unit here, and the mode to modulate its envelope. Right, and this I'm triggering with the A output, but I'm using also the B output to trigger another voice, another VCO unit. This is going through some delay. Right, and this was the sequence at the day I built the patch. I also have another example with two FM operators. In this case, I have a 7-step sequence, and I'm using the value and the mode both as pitch information for two different FM operators. And of course, just like any other sequencer, you can also trigger or drive this sequencer with something else than a clock signal. You can see it says even trigger. You don't even have to use a dedicated clock signal. So in this case, I have another sequence, another 16-step sequence, but I'm using the sequence. Let me show you this. The sequence, the A sequence from the 7-step sequence, right? So there is a 7-step sequence triggering a 16-step sequence, and I have here another voice with VCO units and a delay. Right, so again, a generative sequencer that will give you a different sequence every day. The last module I want to show you today is the new stereo filter from Nano, which will also eventually be available in hardware, and it's basically the stereo version of their font filter, but with quite a lot of new features. Right, so here for example I have a mono signal, just a saw wave. I can use the drive to bring it in. Right, and then already we can crossfade between low pass, band pass, and high pass. We can offset the frequency between the left and the right channels. Right, we can also do this for the resonance and for the mode even, so we can have a different mode on the right channel than on the left. So you can already see that this filter can be quite interesting. Here I have some percussion and a bass. I'm using the Rhythm Explorer from Venom to trigger multiple drum modules here from Dock B, and Keycall as my bass. Right, and this I'm sending to the stereo filter as a stereo voice, right? Some percussion is on the left, some percussion is on the right. I have a nice amount of drive here and some filter modulation. Right, so it sounds quite nice also on percussion. The drive can also be used as a VCA. Right, so here I have another Ona here with a saw wave going through a chorus. So now it's a stereo signal going through the filter, and I'm using an envelope here to open the drive as it were a VCA. So this you can also use. It works also quite nicely as a voice. In this case I have it tuned to two different notes, because again we can offset one channel, so we can have two different notes when the resonance is all the way up. This is going through Nimbus, which is a clouds clone, so it will granulize this. then another filter for some nice drive and reverb. Here I have another example with some modulation, again just a saw wave from Ona, and I have modulation for the drive, the frequency span also, right, to have the left and right a bit different from one another. So I hope you will go and explore these new modules. Once again, consider supporting the developers. Thank you for watching. Cheers.